Welcome to this Bennett Explains finance video. This week, 2 things you should think about doing before the 5th of April. Why the 5th of April? Well, basically, that is the end of the current tax year for individuals. So, this tax year started on the 6th of April 2015, it finishes on the 5th of April 2016, and therefore, there's not long to go. And there are certain things you need to make a decision on before then, because they are effectively use them or lose them deals. So what are they? Okay, a quick checklist. Number 1, use your ISA allowance. Still a bit of an investing no-brainer. Number 2, think about using up your personal pension allowance. Higher rate taxpayers in particular want to keep an eye on changes that could be coming down the line quite soon. Number 3 is then, after you've done that, I'd suggest maybe consider whether you want to use things called enterprise investment schemes and venture capital trusts, but they're pretty chunky to explain, so I'm going to leave those to a future video. Now, ISAs. I cover these in detail in other videos, so here's a snapshot summary. First of all, you can put £15,240 per person into an ISA before the 5th of April, and it's not too late. You can do it as a lump sum, so it's not too late to play catch up if you want to. What's the point? You can shelter a whole range of securities from both further income tax and capital gains tax. That's the tax on profits. And look at this range of things that can potentially be sheltered. Watch out for that one coming up soon. They're going to add peer-to-peer lending in there. We've already got loads of shares, main market and alternative investment market, corporate bonds, government bonds, authorised funds. The range of things that can go in is expanding all the time, and that's great. Lots of flexibility. You've also got plenty of choice about what you allocate to cash and what you allocate to investments now. Now, the power of an ISA, just a reminder about why you're doing this. You're doing this to get tax-free growth, almost a free lunch if you like. All you got to do, put your money in, sit back and watch it hopefully grow. Now, no one's going to guarantee you get these growth rates, but let's look at a kind of low, average and high rate for the UK and assume we can afford to pay in £1,250 per month, and we're going to do that for 15 years. Now, the green bars represent the physical amount you will have paid in at the end. So just multiplying that out, 1,250 times 12 times 15, you get £225,000. And that's the same regardless of the growth rate you subsequently achieve. So here comes the growth. The red slice, a little bit at 2%, decent dollop at 5%, and quite a chunk at 8%, were you to achieve 8%. By the way, the long-term average for the UK over the last 50 years is, not surprisingly, round about the one in the middle, if you're interested. Now, how much would that be? Well, 262,000 on the left, 332,000 in the middle, that's off a £225,000 base. What have you done to get that? You've allowed compounding to work its magic, and you've taken the tax-free growth, so you haven't had to do a lot, frankly. And at the end, £424,000. Yeah, you've had to find the money, but once you found it and popped it in, there you go. Worth knowing, this is a fast and furious tour. Married couples get one each, so that takes you up to over £30,000 between you. It's use it or lose it. That's probably the key one. 5th of April's coming up. If you forget or don't get around to it, by the 7th of April, let's say, you've lost this year's allowance. You can't get that back. Lump sum, if you want to play catch up, or regular saving is allowed. Any split now, loads of flexibility. You can split it any way you like between cash and investments, not like the old days, and transfers between the two are allowed. Watch out for the fact that spouses and civil partners can now inherit ISA tax advantages. They don't die with you. That's quite neat. That's recent. And withdrawals are allowed at any time. So loads of flexibility. Wouldn't recommend you take money out of an ISA unless you need to, because you can't easily reinvest it outside of cash and maintain the benefits in the future that you've enjoyed so far. Okay, number 2, top up your pension. Now, this is important too. So maybe you've used your ISA allowance, you're thinking, where else can I get tax-effective investing from? Pensions could be it. Now, I'm assuming you're not one of those lucky people, and I'm certainly not, who's got a state final salary or a company final salary scheme, defined benefit as they call it. I'm assuming you are having to pay money into a pot, and you don't know what that's going to be worth. It's called money purchase or defined contribution. Now, you and your employer can be chipping in, so that's nice. The problem is the uncertainty, because you rely on the contributions, the tax top-up from the government, and that's attractive. Growth minus charges to give you a pension pot. But how big that pot is, who knows, all right? But the fact you get tax relief on the way in is a big booster. And I want to make a point for higher rate taxpayers in just a moment that's relevant to this tax year. Now, how could that help you? As a basic rate taxpayer, what this means is that every 80p you put in is turned into £1 invested for you at those same growth rates, which are not guaranteed. If you were paying in £250 per month, the government will top that up a bit, don't forget, for 40 years. You could end up at just 2% with 228,000, not that impressive. At the long-term average growth rate for the UK, 464. Now that's getting interesting. Look at the red bar compared to the green, i.e. what you've paid in versus what you've ended up with, and over at 8%, massive difference. £1 million pension pot were you to achieve 8%. So you can see the power here of getting the government top up, the tax-free growth on the way, potentially, at different growth rates. Now, higher rate taxpayers, things get even more interesting if you like. So, same scenario, £250 per month for 40 years. The green and red bars, quite a gap already at just 2%. A huge gap at 5%. This is what you've paid in versus what you've got at the end. And a massive gap at a fairly hefty 8% growth rate. So you can see the potential benefit, and some of that comes from the fact you get tax relief from the government all the way in. For a higher rate taxpayer, every 60p you put in becomes £1 invested. Where else can you get that? Good question. Now, tax basics. How's it all fit together? Just to recap on how tax efficient personal pensions and self-invested personal pensions can be. Basically, as an investor, you get tax relief on the way in at the basic or higher rate. You're taxed on the way out, but there's a big benefit coming up, and you've got a kind of tax shelter on the way through. Now, what's that benefit I mentioned out on the right-hand side? Well, it's this. When you make your retirement decision, you can take the first quarter of your pot out tax-free. Well, that's pretty attractive. So as a higher rate taxpayer, you've got 40% relief on the way in, a 25% lump sum on the way out. That's almost money for nothing, almost. Then you put the rest of your pot into, well, lots of choice now, buying an annuity, an income stream, that gets you some certainty, albeit rates are low, or leave it invested and just draw off the income or the capital that you need. So that's become a lot more flexible, thanks to some changes introduced by the Chancellor last year. Now, here's your problem, coming right up, about to hit you in the face 5th of April. The lifetime allowance is being reduced. So what that means is, and this won't affect everybody, but what that means is if you contribute more than the lifetime allowance over your lifetime, pre-retirement into a pension, you can get hammered for the bit that goes above the allowance. And the government sneakily keep bringing that allowance down, that maximum amount that can go into the pot. It is currently 1.25 million, but from April that drops to 1 million. And the consequence of going above that, if you try and draw off, say, a lump sum at 55, in this example, say the extra 100,000 above the million, that'll be hit at a fairly penal rate of 55% tax, all right? Or you could convert to income, mention that as an option, but you've only got £75,000 to convert because the government will slice off 25% first. So you don't really want to be in a position of having a pension contribution cumulatively above that lifetime allowance. And notice that drops from the 6th of April in effect. Now, the reason this is interesting is the government have basically this year offered people a little bit more in terms of how much they can contribute to a pension. So for a higher rate taxpayer in particular, this is quite interesting. You can put in not just the annual allowance of 40,000 for 2015-16. If you got in early before last year's summer budget in July, you might have managed to sneak in 40,000 before then, and that's safe. You could add another 40,000 being this year's annual allowance, and then bring forward unused allowances from the last 3 years. Add all that up, these amounts change each year, and you could be up to a whopping maximum contribution of 220,000 or 180 if you didn't get in before the 5th of July with the extra 40, subject to net relevant earnings as an employee, I hasten to add. Now, just a reminder, end of the tax year is coming up, all right? So don't sit and watch this video and think, well, I'll leave it a while, because actually you haven't got long. If you want to use your ISA allowance, you want to top up your pension, you need to kind of get a wiggle on, because it is use it or lose it, and the pension rules get less advantageous each year. Lots of ground covered. Questions, the usual place, please.